Here we go. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for our last offsite session of the spring season. We are excited for you to be here, and we have the pleasure of inviting one of our own offsite alumni, Lina Wiley, who is joining us this Saturday morning, afternoon, evening to talk a little bit about her journey as a designer and an artist. A little bit about Lina. Lina is an environmental fashion designer by education and eyewear at the brand Garrett Light, CA Optical by trade, and a multimedia conceptual artist by passion. Through examples of her own journey as a designer and artist, her lecture explores how our daily mundane passions, lessons, and decisions form our individual life's paths that will ultimately contribute to human evolution and the planet at large. I'm excited to host the Q&A after this conversation or after this lecture with Lina. So please come ready with your questions. And with that being said, Lina, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see the presentation?
You're good to go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so like Hector said, I kind of have a different background than maybe some other traditional industrial designers. So I thought it would be kind of a fun theme to do designing your own path or kind of like paving the way to your own career that's not maybe the same as everybody else's, which ultimately everyone kind of does. Um, and yeah, my little intro is very existential, so that's going to be also a theme in my presentation. Um, so yeah, like I said, I have a pretty non-traditional industrial design path. So I was thinking when I was making this that, my experience is just one tiny piece of data in this big, crazy world full of data that you guys can hear and think about and maybe can give you some sort of insight to your own life. I don't know, but I thought it would be a fun exercise to kind of like bounce back between the macrocosm and the microcosm. And so I put some little definitions here. A macrocosm is a whole of a complex structure, especially the world or the universe, contrasted with a small or representative part of it. And then the microcosm, which will be kind of my experience, a community, place, or situation regarded as encapsulating in miniature the characteristic qualities or features of something much larger, aka humankind regarded as the epitome of the universe. So yeah, I just think it's nice to have perspective on each of our individual paths being a part of this much greater whole. So I was thinking it could be nice to kind of bring that into this presentation today and kind of keep it large scale context. Um, so I'll be asking, I'm a pretty like existential person just naturally, and every time I do presentation stuff, I just accidentally go to those places. So you'll see that, but these are some big questions. Who are we? And I think at some point we all kind of start to ask ourselves this question as we grow up. For me, it was probably around the time after high school when you're starting to kind of decide what you want to do, who you want to be in the quote unquote real world. Um, and you kind of start to wonder like who are we as a whole? So I kind of broke it down a little bit. And just so you know, I'm not like an anthropologist or anything. Like this is just from a design perspective, things I like to remember when I'm thinking about my path and the journey of life, if you will. So first and foremost, we are a species. We are a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. And humans are really special because we have this thing called consciousness, which is the quality or state of being aware, especially of something within oneself. And because we get to be conscious, we are able to be problem solvers and we're able to go through our life and recognize the things that are difficult and try to think of solutions to those things. And I think like in general, humans have a baseline level of problem solving, and that's kind of why we live in a society where we work at all. So problem solver is a thinker who focuses on a problem as stated and tries to synthesize information and knowledge to achieve a solution. And then lastly, like here in Offsite in this advanced design kind of like community, we are for the most part, designers. So a designer is a person who plans the form, look, or workings of something before it's being made or built, typically by drawing it in detail. So we're basically like aesthetic and functional planners, which is really cool. So now I'll switch to the microcosm, which is who am I as an individual? So I'm a human. I was randomly born as a human. And as you grow up, you start to assume identities. Oh, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm an owner or a parent, if you will, of a cat named Bruce. Um, and then, I kind of was a very a dreamer child. So I like to imagine a lot. I like to draw, and that kind of led to my ultimate career as a designer. Um, and I'll get more into exactly my career specifically in a second, but this is kind of like my personal little hierarchy of identity. So back to the macrocosm, where did we come from? So I don't want to bore you with like a bunch of history or anything, but I will give you a little bit of history because I think it's really important contextually to think about the past and it gives you a sense of where we are today and what that means and what kind of weight that holds. So this is a bit in depth, so I'll kind of skim over it. And I just like history, and this was also just fun to make. So I'll just give the highlights. But I think the planet is something like approximately 5 billion years old, which is extremely old. And our human species really has only been around 6 million years old. So we're very a new species in the history of the planet. And we really, obviously, we split from the apes and we really started to become humans who were conscious and problem solving 2.8 million years ago when we started making the first tools and kind of the first designers started designing solutions to their problems. And then somebody discovered fire and it became widely adopted, and that really like kicked off our evolution into becoming Homo sapiens, which I think it's around here, it says 200,000 years ago. We can anatomically be pretty similar to the people who existed then, the humans, which is pretty cool and crazy. And then 50,000 years ago, language and collaboration became really widely spread. And that's when we were able to share more knowledge more quickly and pass it down generation to generation. And that was huge for us in terms of learning what problems were already solved and how we can adapt them generations to come. Yes, so we were survival specialists back then. And then we discovered agriculture, which really changed the way we could live because our food was already being grown and hoarded in a supply. So we could use our brains to focus on bigger problems. And after that, we were able to start focusing on things like science. And we learned math and physics, astronomy, biology, chemistry only 500 years ago, which is so recent and kind of crazy to think about. And from there, we had the Industrial Revolution, and we were able to start manufacturing goods, and we became super ultra efficient. And that's what led us into the last 100 years, where now we have computers and the internet and social media and all these things, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I just think like thinking about this human history is really important to think about where we are right now and kind of have that perspective. I think the stat is like in all of human history, we live in 0.001% of the culture that it is, how it is now, which is crazy that we all exist right now in that. Um, so back to the microcosm, where did I come from? So I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. I lived there for 22 years and I did all my childhood, my high school, my college there. I'm Italian American, so I was in a very Italian American kind of culture group there, community. So I really love cooking. I really love, these are some Italian cookies. I really love gardening. This is me when I was a kid learning how to garden. And my Italian grandma was a seamstress, and my Italian grandpa was a hairdresser. So I had early exposure to like fashion and beauty, and I was just enchanted by it all. So that kind of paved the way for me to go to art school and study fashion design. So I actually didn't study industrial design at school. I studied fashion design. Um, and then in 2020, I moved to Los Angeles, which was a crazy time to move, but I think it was good. And I can get into now what kind of jobs I've had. So my first job, like official, like adult big girl job, was at a luxury accessories brand called Jennifer Bear. And you can see here it's very sculptural accessories. So it's interesting, like looking back, I'm like, this really combined my interests of art and fashion, but also there is a lot of industrial design, sculptural elements and functional elements to headwear and jewelry. So that was my first like internship, design internship. And then I worked for nearly 2 years at a small local St. Louis brand called Civil Alchemy. And they also did jewelry and they did homewares. So I got some really great experience there during college. I just work on the weekends, and it was fun to work for a local place and kind of like help them build their brand from the ground up, which was great. And then when I moved to LA, I started as more of a production assistant at this brand called Entire World, and they did loungewear. So they were kind of like known for these uh, monochromatic sweatsuits. And during the pandemic, those were highly coveted. So that was a really fun start. And then I ended up getting a job title switch into design, which was what I wanted. So that was great. Um, Unfortunately, the brand closed after I worked there for a year. Obviously, it was a hard time for a lot of businesses. So that was crazy. I think I was watching Amir's video last week or the other week, and his first job also ended in bankruptcy. And it's very jarring when that happens, but that's kind of like what led to my reflection about what I wanted to be doing with my time in my career. And that's when I decided I wanted to pivot more towards hard goods. So I signed up for Offsite, and I had the best time ever. I was in the 2021 cohort. So yeah, it was great. I learned so much, and I'm sure you guys know about Offsite very well. And if you just wrapped up, congrats. And yeah, and then I actually got this job at Garrett Light, California Optical in eyewear around the same time that I started Offsite. So that was very great and serendipitous, but I'll get more into eyewear in a bit. So now we have our history. So now where are we right now? We talked about where humans have been, and so now I want to kind of cover kind of the big context of where we exist and what we exist in right now. So a lot of geologists and environmental scientists are calling the age that we live in right now the Anthropocene. So all that stuff I talked about earlier was the Holocene. So the Anthropocene is, I'll read it here, the period of time during which human activities have had an environmental impact on the Earth, regarded as constituting a distinct geological age. So basically, the Anthropocene started when our problem solving was going so far as affecting the planet at large and changing the geology and the chemical makeup of the atmosphere and the ground we live in on. So that's a really interesting context to how we live, where we live right now, and sort of the problems we're facing now, being the climate crisis. The second thing is the information age. So I'll read it. The modern age regarded as a time in which information has become a commodity that is quickly and widely disseminated and easily available, especially through the use of computer technology. So we live in a crazy age where, like I said earlier, language was hugely big innovation for us to be able to share the problems that we were solving with everyone. And now with computers and the internet and everything that's followed, information is so accessible and we can learn anything so quickly. Even just making this presentation, I use Google a ton, and it's crazy how much you can organize information very accessibly these days. And it's yeah, I think it's a huge part of the world we live in right now and how we as designers can use that as a tool. And then the third thing is capitalism, which probably the majority of countries have some version of for their economy at this point. An economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, by investments that are determined by private decision, and by prices, production, and the distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition in the free market. So, yes, capitalism is exactly that. And it's a really important thing, I think, especially as designers. I think Spencer talks a lot about this in his class. That we really do design within this structure where products are commodities that are helping us compete with other businesses and where money is the main driver. And I think it can be really frustrating sometimes it is as a designer when you wish money wasn't part of it and you wish you could just make the best possible product, possible problem solving, functional goods. But it's important to think of all these things, I think, when you're developing your path, designing your path, and also just going about your day to day. So back to the microcosm, where am I? Where am I right now? So, like I said earlier, I am now an eyewear designer, which I'm really grateful to be. I think it's a nice middle ground in the Venn diagram of fashion design and industrial design, and also tech in a lot of ways. So this is like a mini history of eyewear design if anyone's interested, but eyewear design also has a really rich history that goes all the way back. You can see here to like 37 AD in the Roman Empire. And it's fundamentally tied to the Earth's resources using glass and stones and eventually metals and horn and different materials to help us see as humans. So um, just another point in our evolution where we got to see better, which helped many people to be able to be more efficient and focus on their own problem solving in their lives because they didn't have to worry about their eyesight. And really, just in the last 20th century, did eyewear become so well developed that we can now focus more on the fashion side of it. And we can think about lens shapes and self-expression and not just kind of like how to solve vision because optometrists have really got that down. But eyewear design is also really exciting, I think, as we're going into the spatial computing age and the VR age, because who knows how eyewear traditional eyewear experts are going to be needed as we adapt to new tech that's being incorporated into eyewear. I think the new Ray-Ban Meta glasses are super cool, so I'm excited to see how all that evolves. Um, the next two things I just put because obviously eyewear design is how I make my money, but there's still big other parts of my life. So one is that I just moved to Brooklyn from LA like 6 months ago, and I really love it. And I spend a lot of time just observing and learning, living and building my new community here. And it's been so lovely. And I think that's a huge part of my day to day, and I wanted to include it. And that really, all those things really do take up a big part of like the path that you're on. I think when we think of our paths, we often just think of our careers, but it's more than just our careers. And the third thing is I do a lot of independent art projects. Like I think I told Hector I'm a artist by passion, since it's not making me any money or anything, but it is just really fulfilling a part of me that doesn't want to work within a capitalist structure sometimes, wants to just make art to have a message or have a way of expressing something. So I do a lot of upcycling with trash and other just unusable, but maybe not unusable to me, but old materials that are no longer used. I've dipped my toe into filmmaking a little bit. I made a little short with a friend in LA when I was there. And then the last thing that I've been really into is animation, which I can show my examples on the next page. So here on the left is like a little screenshot from an animation. I've just been really into this independent project where I'm kind of trying to envision a future that I want to live in and make little digital sketches that are animated. So that's kind of just like a side thing that I've been doing. And then here in the middle is obviously a campaign image from the company I work at Garrett Light, and a beautiful pair of glasses that I worked on, called the Gilbert. And then on the right, you can see this is one of the fashion looks I've made from upcycled bubble wrap. I just collected it from a bunch of people in my community that had surprisingly bubble wrap, or maybe unsurprisingly, people kind of hoard it because sometimes they spend money on it or they think they might need it. And, you always feel bad throwing it away. So it was funny. I put out a call for bubble wrap and a lot of people were like, I have so much, I need to get rid of it. It's taking up too much space. Um, so I made a 6 look collection last year out of bubble wrap, just on the side of my job, and had a little fashion show. So that was really fun. So that's me. But now I want to ask, where are we trying to go as humans, as a species, as a planet? And the answer is unknown. I do not know where exactly we're trying to go, but we can really imagine where we would like to go. And I think as designers, that's a big part of our responsibility is to imagine, like I said earlier, being a designer is planning um, aesthetic and function. So maybe we can design or plan for a world we want to live in. So I just put a bunch of words that for me feel like the future I'd like to live in: equity, peace, healthcare, clean energy, regeneration, and education. Um, and I think Hector's done a great job on the education portion, just designing something, he wanted to see, which was more accessible education. And so I think, it's hard to answer that question, but we can we can have an idea. And then where am I trying to go as an individual? I also don't really know, but I know what I like to do and like how I like to spend my time. I like to design, I like to read, garden, cook, craft, talk, play games, reflect, and problem solve. And I think by enjoying the things you really like to do, and also thinking about the big picture of the places you want to go, you can really kind of find an intersection between those things. I see someone's in the chat. Maybe I should open this. Oh, he's at the actor said thanks. Okay. Thanks for listening. It's like so weird when it's just a bunch of squares that you're talking to. Okay. So finally, but I mean this presentation is called Designing Your Own Path. So what is our path and what is my path? And it's hard to have an answer, and I don't think it's always helpful to have an answer. But as a little individual in this big world, I think we can kind of have some northern stars that can guide our path. Even if we don't really know where we're going or the goal, we can kind of just keep following our northern star. So one of the things I think as a northern star that has really been helpful for me, and that kind of ties into everything I've been saying, is practicing a gratitude mindset for the things I'm lucky enough to already have and for the problems that have already been solved for me. So, for example, knowing how fire works, I never had to figure that out. And that's great because I can think about other things and have the opportunity to have an impact on today's current problems. And we get to think about the solutions to the new problems humanity is having. And that's really exciting. And I think it's really cool to have a responsibility like that today. And I did put a little disclaimer here though, because there's a lot to be saddened by in the world all the time. And I think it's really okay. And oftentimes it's really important to feel that sadness and to feel critical of the way things are in the world. But I do think it's possible to hold space for those sad feelings and those critiques, while also simultaneously having gratitude for other things that have happened and that you get to have an experience. And I think both of those truths can exist. But I just want to put that disclaimer because sometimes it's like gratitude mindset, like just be happy, but that's not what I mean. Um, and this is kind of the conclusion of the whole thing is I think the Northern Star is just doing as many of the things that I love to do and that we love to do as often as we possibly can. I know Spencer did Ikigai, and I think about that all the time. And it's like sometimes you can't always just do the thing you love, and that's okay. You have to make money, and that's part of life. And like I said, we live in capitalism, so gotta make money. But doing the things we love as often as we can, with the intention of creating the future we want to live in. So I think there's a lot of examples of this, like oh, I was thinking of one yesterday. Oh, okay, I was thinking like, let's say you love to drink craft beer, and that's like one of the things you just like love to do. So you're going to do that as often as you can. But maybe the future you want to live in is where all the craft beer that you drink is locally made, and you get to meet the person who brewed it, and you feel like you're supporting the local economy. And I think if you want to see that happen, like you can have the intention of doing that whenever you drink craft beer. So then you'll seek out those places, you'll go introduce yourself to the owners, and you'll kind of make that future real. And I think that's kind of what designing your own path is kind of imagining that future and then just thinking about it and trying to incorporate it into the things you love. And that can also go for in your job too. Um, and I think that's it. Yeah. And I know I didn't touch so much on the details of eyewear design and kind of like my career. So if you guys have any questions about those things, you can ask me now, or I'm so happy to talk to anyone individually anytime. I think I've had a couple Zooms with offsiters about eyewear design specifically, which has been great because I can nerd out about that for forever. But I just wanted to use this little mini platform to kind of get existential with you all. Yeah, so that's what I've got. If anyone has any questions or wants me to go back, uh, I really timed it to be a little bit longer, but I talk so fast when I get excited.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. We are going to jump in and start to have a conversation around questions and some of the things that we saw here. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Um, and I can get started. And for those who are here, I encourage you to ask questions and put them here in the chat, and we'll integrate in our conversation here. But question that I have for you, Lena, um, well, I loved your presentation because it gives us just a different perspective of how you think as a designer and how everything is connected to what you do. I'd love to hear about like your thoughts on reflection as a designer. I think it's really easy for us to just kind of do things like, especially and that kind of begins in this capitalist world that you were talking about. Like we live in this kind of bubble and our parents, whether you're born here, your parents are born here, or they immigrate here, they are part of this machine that's constantly moving, right? And it's exhaustive.
Mm,
Um, and it's easy for our parents to say, okay, go to school, then go to college, and then go this and then do that. And it's always moving. We're always moving to some direction.
mhm.
Um, what is and again, it's easy for us to go to our 9 to 5 and do design and always feel like we constantly have to do something. How important is reflection and to really think about some of these concepts that you're talking about and intent and purpose, right? Because I don't think we were made whatever you believe in. I don't think our purpose here was to come here to work.
Yeah, right. That's a great question. I'm a huge fan of reflection, and I think, yeah, like you said, like every generation does the best they can with the tools they're given, and I think as we have new generations, we are given more tools from our parents, and it's nice to think of it like that in the big realm where maybe you judge your own parents less when you think about, okay, they're doing the best they can with how they were raised. But now I have these new tools and I hope I can pass them on to other people, whether it's your own kids or offsiders or anything. But yeah, reflection I think is hugely important. And I think like as a society, we've gotten more uh we've started to realize that more. I think, well, in my own life, I do a lot of journaling. Um, I don't hold myself to any kind of standard for that. I'm not like I have to journal every day or I have whatever. I just kind of do it whenever I feel inspired to do it. And I think that helps me to know exactly like work through what I'm feeling about certain things, especially in design. And also like having conversations like this is such a good way to reflect as a community and sort of, cut through the weeds of all the chaos of this life and like try to make some sense of what you're doing and the purpose you're trying to fulfill. Yeah, I don't, did that answer?
Yeah,
Um,
no, for sure. Yeah, and I think it's okay for us designers to sometimes have an identity crisis as well
oh
because
yeah,
it really allows you to, well, first it like brings you to a halt and
yeah,
you start to ask questions. Is this what I want to do? What is it that I'm looking for in this life? It's almost like you become self-aware, like,
yeah,
and you um back in 2012, I kind of hit that. I had an identity crisis, and because I was just exhausted of working. And I was like, is this what I'm gonna do for the next 50 years? And then I just retire and then that's it. Right. And it led me to everyday question and
yeah,
find some level of happiness or whatever that was defined for me. And then that's what led me into pivoting into education and starting to go down this path. So, yeah, I think reflection is good. I think it's good for you to really just think about and um,
yeah. An identity crisis, I mean, that's like what we call it, colloquially, but I think
yeah.
it's another thing like the human body and the human brain has created as a survival technique. Like if
Mm,
we're feeling burnout or we're feeling really misaligned with the work we're putting all our energy into, it makes sense that we would have an identity crisis because we're realizing like, our time can be better spent on things that we would like to work on more, like to see the future we want. And so it totally makes sense. And I think you're right. Like it's a tool to regroup, re-reflect, and kind of like think about how you actually want to spend your time. I had one too when I got laid off from, or when that job I had in apparel clothes. I was like, do I really want to just be like making trendy clothes because
mm.
people think they want that and are manipulated into buying them? Like, no, I want to, and that's why I did Offsite because I was like, I need to like regroup and understand like what my purpose is as a designer and what I really want to be working on. So totally.
Do you have a design philosophy?
But yeah, I see that. First of all, thanks everyone for the love in the chat. It's nice to know people are listening. Um, do I have a design philosophy? That's a great question. Yeah, I guess my design philosophy is I always try to think uh secondly think and tertiary think, whatever, do it multiple times. Like, does the world need this? And or do I just want this? Like sometimes I think there's an easy slippery slope between this is fun to make because I'm a designer and things, it's satisfying, versus like, does the world need this? Do people need to see this? Does it have some sort of message or like um bigger idea attached to it? Obviously it's different when you're like, building your portfolio and it's just digital, but I think especially if you're making products, uh, it's a big responsibility and you have to think about that. But that being said, like going back to the ikigai thing again, like I said, we have to make money. So that's hard. Like I remember Spencer gave this example of when he worked on like a gun design and stuff. I think about that all the time. But you have to do what you have to do to live and exist. But I think that's when those side passions you have really become important. And that's where you can like exercise your design philosophy all the time and you have autonomy to do that.
Do you think that as designers we should have our philosophy? I see a lot of outsiders here, and I think, and you mentioned multiple times Spencer's course played a pretty big
Yeah.
role, really asking some of these questions. And then, that's the reason why that course exists when we were building out Offsite. Um, I struggled as a person who teaches in traditional academia. I struggle to help students like be more articulate when it comes to design. Like
Mhm.
students tend to be just I like this and I like that, and I'm just like, well, I I don't like those answers. When you're a designer, you need to really think a little higher level. And so
Yeah.
I had proposed this idea of we need to have a course where we talk about some of these really big questions and really prepare students to speaking the language of not just design, but just speaking the human language, right? And so you mentioned that and how, Spencer really talks about that and uses some different methods, to really help students kind of develop that. So with that being said, like what is your advice to these students, even students in college right now, as far as like, is this something that they should be thinking about a philosophy or even like, or even just having some type of ethos of, it doesn't have to be necessarily design, but something that they truly maybe can stand for.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it's interesting because we're not really taught in school how much of a responsibility it is to be a designer. Like, I
Mhm.
think the ethical part of it, which is why I keep talking about Spencer's class, because that was kind of the first time anyone really tangibly put that into curriculum type of sense, where it was like we have a responsibility as designers to create things that the world needs and that are actually solving problems um and not just kind of self-indulgent. Um, However, I will say like I think especially like when I was in university at college, like it's such a growth time when you're really trying to understand yourself and the world and like the relationship between the two. So I do have like a bit of I feel a little bit more gentle on those kids. Those kids, they're not that much younger than me, but like I feel more gentle because I think like at that time you're still kind of finding your voice and when you're designing there it is a bit selfish, but it's part of
Mhm.
the process of like understanding yourself before then you can have these bigger revelations of like, wait, I exist in a much bigger context. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Teachers are just amazing and I have so much respect for them. And I don't know how as a teacher you kind of hold space for both of those things, like teach the
Yeah.
responsibility while also letting the students to kind of have that self-indulgence to find themselves and to feel like they have that confidence in foundation so that they can then kind of have the self-discovery of like, oh, the ethics are really important. Um, yeah, design ethos. I'd have to think about it. Like if I had to come up with one design ethos that like every student graduated with, I think it would be something like design with, well, that's not good enough. I was gonna say design with intention.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, design for the future you want to see. It
Yeah.
sounds so cheesy, but I think that's a good one because, yeah,
I mean, it kind of like, it's I like that because it's kind of very similar to treat others the way you want to get treated, right?
totally.
So it's like a very like community kind of selfless, like we gotta think about each other, right? Versus, yeah, I really like that actually. And very similar to Spencer's story, I had to walk away from a job that when I had just recently graduated, I was designing a weapon for crowd control, and I was a recent grad. So I was, not in the position to be like, I have options. As a
Yeah.
student, I was like, yes, I'll do this and et cetera. And I was doing CAD and other design work for it. And I was working on it for 6 months before I realized this is not like I'm part of the problem. And that was really tough because that was the toughest one of the toughest things I had to do because I had just recently graduated. I was working during the global recession where there was no other, like the jobs were very, not a lot of them existed. And I was like, and so I just resigned from that position. And, you know, it was a very uncertain time. But yeah, I think there's, yeah.
Yeah, power to you. That's so hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and if that's something you want to do, you know, that's an option. And if it's something that it definitely like puts you in a very, difficult situation. But I think a lot of it does come down to, like you mentioned, design with intention, design, treat others the way you want to get treated. And that really just, if you apply that to design, then you'll realize what is it that you want to design. And it's hard. You recently graduated, trying to find a job.
Oh yeah. When you recently
Mm.
get graduated, you're like, I'll do anything.
Exactly. Like, how do you approach, like, we don't have these privilege to be like, oh no, I'll pass this job and like that's just not how the world works. It's not that black and white. So, yeah, I think it's good to at least allow for us to think and really
Yeah.
dissect
And
what's
I think
happening.
even those things, like they're really, it's very hard when you're going through it and you're feeling stressed and you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. But ultimately it's a stepping stone for you to like discover the truth that you're in now. And I think like it's kind of the idea of like, oh, you sometimes you go through hardship to come out the other end and be a better person ultimately. And it's really hard when you're in it, obviously, and it's really confusing and you have identity crisis, but it is part of the like path, it's part of the journey, and like you can forgive yourself for that. Like you can say like actually that adversity or like that misalignment with my career really like launched me into the thing that I'm now going to do forever that I feel really aligned with. And now I know like never to go back. And that's kind of, I think the early years after school, I mean, I'm in my 20s, so like pretty much in your 20s and then probably beyond, but it's kind of like you're still collecting a lot of data of like I like this, I don't like this feels terrible, like this feels good, like that I feel like excited by this, or like this makes me feel really stressed and disheartened. Like you're still kind of like collecting all that data, and it's okay to make mistakes or have those experiences that are more negative, because I think that then and you'll never do it again, or you can tell your friends and then they won't do it again. And I
Hmm.
think it's, as a society, we have to kind of like go through those things to know that we don't want that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you have any designers that inspire you? Maybe any cultures that any design cultures or any regions of the world that you are really attracted to as a creative
Mm.
person?
Oh, that's a fun question. I mean, like I said, I have a lot of heritage in Italy, so I feel very connected to a lot of like Sicilian history, and like my great grandfather was a furniture maker. So I think that inspires me a lot when I think about just like family history and and kind of like like I said, your microcosm generational kind of like teachings, which, I never met my grandfather. He didn't teach me anything about furniture, but somehow like elements of that get passed down into you, whether it's just like personality traits or something. Yeah. I mean, okay, unfortunately I have some gaps in my like industrial design history because I didn't go to school for it. But I really love I have a lot of I know a lot about art and artists. I'm very inspired by the Surrealist movement because I think some of those like conceptual pieces that actually was a very early form of upcycling for a lot of them, with random found objects. That that art gives me a lot of inspiration because the messages feel so poignant. Um, and yeah, I know for some people art can be really like hard to grasp when you look at it, but I think things that give you a sense of wonder or curiosity or kind of prompt your reflection. Like I think of art as just like prompts for reflection, right? So that really inspires me, like Schiaparelli, Dali, Maria Oppenheim. I'm not good at German names, but
Okay.
yeah.
And we can wrap up our conversation here with a little bit about your interests in fashion, right? You talked about going to school for fashion design, and now there seems to be this kind of crossover between a little bit of industrial design, fashion design. I think in general, just the creativity that there's a lot of overlap, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'd love to hear about what you do now as a professional designer. And is it a very standard, like, okay, I'm going to do, industrial design, or is it a combination of different disciplines that you tend to just, is it very interdisciplinary, right? And did that
Mhm.
just kind of happen and you just kind of continue to, you know, learn new skills and then you kind of created this persona for yourself? Or is your job really straightforward? Like,
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think so. Fashion design originally really appealed to me because I really love like all the forms of art, like 2D, 3D, um, like the draping elements, like it's very sculptural, and I love apparel and self-expression. So I think that's what drop like originally got me into fashion. And then as I was getting older, like I was really studying sustainable fashion, environmental fashion. Um, and as I got older, I realized how paradoxical like the fashion industry is in that way. It's really hard to even touch on sustainability when you're constantly making new products that are trend driven. So that was where I was really frustrated, and decided I wanted to work on goods that were a little bit more functional and solving more uh, human-based problems. And I've always like my past jobs, I've always been interested in accessories, which are basically wearable hard goods. So I think that's where the industrial design portion comes in. Um, and I think eyewear is, like I said, like a really good intersection of all those things because there is like this potential for the tech element. There is this very like optometrist scientific biology element, and then there is this like self-expression fashion element. Um, and then there is the industrial design like technical function element in terms of like comfort and facial balance and design and all that. So yeah, I really love eyewear. It's such a niche industry, but I think I do exercise like all of those parts for the most part in my job every day. We do a lot. I mean, we work millimeters. We balance things, move it zero point 0.2 millimeters, move it out zero point 0.1 mil. Like we really try to work on the balance, both visual balance and facial balance. Um, we think a lot about ergonomic comfort on the ears and on the nose and nose pads. And we think a lot about self-expression. Oh, certain skin tones look better in these kinds of colors, certain skin, certain eye colors, certain hair colors, they want this lens or whatever. So it's really fun I do feel like I'm problem solving a lot. However, at the same time, I'll be honest, like I work at a fashion brand, I mean, eyewear brand, which to me is a fashion brand, where at the end of the day, you have to make money. So we
mm,
also look at a lot of sales data and a lot of hindsighting. But sometimes I go back and forth where I'm like, it's frustrating to have to like design for capitalism, but then on the flip side, it's like the sales data tells the truth. Like these are what people want. This is what people want.
mm.
So it's good to give them what they want, if that's what they need. If they need a brown frame, we should make brown frames. Um, so I think I have found, at least for now, a good middle ground between all my interests and something I feel good showing up to and like working on every day, and that I'm not just kind of like making part of my like making crap to make crap, like, like it's easy to do that. So
No, absolutely. And I think sometimes there is a double-edged sword, like you have to kind of pick your battles. And, I think it's pretty awesome, that there's these different disciplines that exist. And honestly, industrial design can come in so many different forms and different formats, right? And so, in education, I think a lot of designers are attracted to education because they feel like this is my way of perhaps influencing the future of design and designers, right? But then education, the people who invest in education are usually corporations, right? So it's like this double-edged sword. But at least you're able to then take their money,
Yeah.
pour it into something
Repurpose
good.
it
But
to something good.
everything, yeah,
No, it's crazy to think about like
yeah,
schools are businesses,
yeah,
hospitals are businesses. It's crazy to think about that sometimes,
yeah. I
but
think we just have to do our best to just make the best decisions possible. So.
absolutely.
Well, Lina, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank
It's
you, Hector,
really
for the
appreciated.
platform. It's so fun to have a
Absolutely.
platform.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you everyone for joining. This will be uploaded and shared with you all. And Lina, I'm sure we'll be in touch and have a wonderful weekend. And for those who are in the States, have a wonderful holiday weekend. So take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Lina.
Bye.